Welcome to episode 2 of the Swan Song series. It's late November 1973 at Headley Grange. A new supergroup called Bad Company completes their first album. Rehearsals loom, gigs are being whispered, and Swan Song's most explosive act is preparing for impact. 1974 looks promising indeed. Hold that thought. We'll come back to Bad Company's breakout later in the episode. Led Zeppelin went on a temporary hiatus following John Paul Jones's departure, aka vacation from the band, and Robert planned surgery to remove polyps from his vocal cords. Manager Peter Grant sent a third Swan Song artist to Headley Grange, maximizing precious available Zeppelin studio time. Their name? The Pretty Things, who just played Frankfurt on November 1st. They were the first established or pre-existing group Swan Song managed to sign. Now, the original plan by Page and Plant was to sign Roy Harper to their label. Jimmy played guest spot on Roy's Stormcock and Life Mask albums, but it wasn't enough for Roy's manager, who wouldn't set him free from his EMI subsidiary Harvest record contract. So Page and Plant looked elsewhere and went with 60s powerhouse innovators, the Pretty Things, whose first 3 albums had singer Phil May beating Mick Jagger at his own game. Phil May rocks. Their 1965 to 1967 period rivals the best works from 60s artists in terms of sound, songwriting, and delivery. They developed a side cult following among upcoming British rock musicians. The main consensus with the Pretty Things is that they should have been huge, yet album sales success eluded them. Like many rock stars who lived their part, their unsung hero story was a contrast of showmanship, personal sabotage, and a dose of bad luck. They released their first rock opera, SF Sorrow, through EMI in December 1968, yet the American version released through Motown was pushed back until August 1969, months after Tommy, so critics thought the Pretty Things were a second-rate The Who. SF Sorrow should be in the same conversation as Sgt. Pepper's, Their Satanic Majesty's Request, and Tommy. Anyway, by late 1969, the band had to pay the bills and resorted to recording music library pieces and some independent films where people did softcore things. They released one more great-sounding EMI Harvest record, 1970's Parachute. The Hypnosis Design album was their last to feature key Pretty Things contributor Wally Waller on bass, guitar, and vocals. By late 1972, they played some 30 dates in both the UK and Germany, including the Essen Pop Carnival, next to Deep Purple, Osibiza, and Atomic Rooster, plus a last-minute addition to the Windsor Arts Festival. The band found a new label in Warner Brothers, with Freeway Madness released in December to poor album sales, not rocking the charts, but you gotta praise the production courtesy of Asa Jones, which was the studio alias for Wally Waller. 1973 had a strange 20-concert agenda with shows in the UK, the United States, Finland, France, Germany, and a rock festival in Norway, Ragnarok 73, which captured their performance for a 90-minute documentary film. And then no touring plans, until they got lucky once again. So just like David Bowie producing Mata Hoople's All the Young Dudes to help them boost their popularity, Bowie released Pinups in October 1973 featuring two Pretty Things' covers. Rosalind, and Don't Bring Me Down. That album peaked at number 23 in America, so The Pretty Things were a good idea on paper. Peter Grant signed them for a career comeback on Swan Song Records. The band's lineup kept veterans Phil May, keyboardist Joan Povey, and drummer Skip Allen. New faces were string wizard Pete Tolson on guitars and Gordon Edwards on bass, who was also the main songwriter behind Sunshine. That band's 1972 debut was produced by Asa Jones and would somewhat influence The Pretty Things' new sonic palette. The initial Silk Torpedo sessions at Headley Grange were cut short, partly due to falling pianos, and partly because the band needed to book the London Philharmonic Orchestra. So, The Pretty Things moved back to London, just around the corner from the Swan Song offices. Kinda. Olympic Studios became their new base, the same place where Led Zeppelin had recorded their debut, adding a sense of full circle continuity to the story. Engineering duties went to Houses of the Holy's Keith Harwood, and it shows. The album's crisp, punchy mix predates New Wave by about 4 years. Seasoned studio pro Norman Smith was brought in as producer. His resume included The Pretty Things' own SF Sorrow and Parachute, 3 early Pink Floyd records, and several albums by Barclay James Harvest. String arrangements were handled by Graham Prescott, whose credits included Mother Hoople's final album with Mick Ralphs from Bad Company. Their album, Silk Torpedo, it was finished by December 1973, but we're not pressing play on that one, not just yet. That story and a full album walkthrough comes in episode 3.
No one has profited more from the rock phenomenon than the $2 billion a year recording industry. The rock recording industry rolls on, and the stakes are high. Of 7,500 new releases a year, only 150 will be hits.
I'm a bit upset that there's not a pool table on board.
January 1974. Jumble Jones was back and Led Zeppelin resumed sessions for Physical Graffiti. I recommend you check my Making of series episode 2, as it includes many timeline events relevant to her story. February 15th, 1974. Just a day after planned Page and Bonham joined Roy Harper's Valentine concert, Maggie Bell's Queen of the Night had an early Polydor release in every market except America. I think it's such a strange coincidence Maggie rocked a tie-dyed hairstyle, just like Todd Rundgren's Todd album, released that same month. Strange, right? So both executive producers for Queen of the Night, Peter Grant and Mark London, criticized Maggie's debut as too polished, thinking much attention was taken away from her. In a way, they felt the record was too Americanized, like Kiki Dee's 1970 Tamla Motown record. You be the judge. First off, let me just say Maggie's voice is incredible throughout the album. She sings with power and soul, so she's not to blame for the end result, really. So what's the problem with the record? Production. The dry studio sound doesn't do Maggie nor the band any favors, especially on the slow tracks because they sound similar to each other. Maggie should have been recorded live on stage to fully express herself. Now, her voice is so powerful, you can actually hear some microphone distortion or clipping throughout the album, on and off. Next, the arrangements. Some feel uninspired or just by the numbers. The worst offender is the Latin influence arrangement of After Midnight. It completely ruins J.J. Cale's classic and clashes with Maggie's vocal intention. It's truly a horrible experience I never want to relive. Lastly, the timing. The album came out in 1974, long after Gladys Knight's Imagination, which had the song Midnight Train to Georgia, and you can help to compare Maggie's release to this one. So I'll say Queen of the Night's biggest problem is that it didn't have a massive hit. It's not a record I will be buying. Too bad, because Maggie's singing is top notch.
Oh, chicken? Snap. Snap is. And it's softer on my skin. Silly, it can't be, can they? It is.
How's her skin feel? Soft and smooth. Creamy cat.
Paul Rodgers and Bad Company made its potent live debut with 2 warm-up gigs in Switzerland on February 23rd and 24th in support of Nazareth and Tempest. Back in England and past their 3rd gig at Newcastle City Hall on March 9th, Bad Company played the 9 remaining dates of their first UK tour all through April, gaining momentum on their tight live unit sound and building up hype for their impending debut album release. Fun fact, American series Columbo premiered a March 1974 episode by the name of Swan Song, featuring none other than Johnny Cash himself. The plot revolves around a popular country singer that wanted to get rid of his wife. Maggie Bell embarked on a 37-date US tour, March through June, with 1 UK concert spliced in the middle of the American schedule. She played as support for names like Foghat, Johnny Winter, The Kinks, Strawbs, Procol Harum, Dave Mason, and Slade. Concert bookings included a spot at the Schaefer Music Festival on June 17th. It was a grueling schedule going through opposite spectrum cities and weather conditions, but Maggie pulled through as you had to make it in America somehow. Maggie Bell's Queen of the Night was released in America through Atlantic Records in April 1974 and would face tough competition with soon-to-be released albums like Kiki D's I've Got the Music in Me. You can check that retrospective here on the channel. Despite 3 Maggie Bell singles released via Oh My My, After Midnight, and Cat Queen, her album peaked at number 122 on Billboard. Record sales were not good. Led Zeppelin finally settled on a name for their record label. Swan Song Records was inspired by Jimmy's acoustic suite and maybe, just maybe, a 1920s American label, Black Swan Records. But it wasn't the most optimistic choice, as a swan song is traditionally an artist's final work before fading away. Hypnosis was called in for their first collaboration with Led Zeppelin since Houses of the Holy. A logo was commissioned. The design was based on a 19th century painting, Evening the Fall of Day, painted in 1869 by William Rimmer, late in his career. A blend of classical anatomy and mystical allegory, the image captured something timeless. Contrary to popular belief, it wasn't intended as Icarus. The figure remains ambiguous. Some see a sun god, others a fallen angel. Either way, the name Swan Song would carry an eerie sense of foreshadowing for the years ahead. This wasn't Apple, this wasn't Manticore, this wasn't a tongue-out logo. This was Evening, the Fall of Day. Joe Petagno, an up-and-coming American illustrator in the early 1970s, was making a name for himself in London's vibrant design scene. His recent work included album covers like Sufficiently Breathless by Captain Beyond, Whatever Turns You On by Wes Bruce and Lang, and Roy Harper's Valentine, released in February 1974, which notably featured a guest electric guitar spot by Jimmy Page. While working in London, Petagno crossed paths with the legendary design studio Hypnosis. Hired by Storm Thorgerson and Aubrey Powell, he quickly became a trusted contributor, impressing them with his sharp drawing techniques and vivid imagination. So when Led Zeppelin commissioned a logo for their upcoming label, Hypnosis assigned the task to Petagno. He was given the job of transforming William Rimmer's Evening into a polished, dramatic emblem. The result was a now iconic rendering of the winged figure, one of rock's most recognizable images, paired with the Swan Song lettering itself, cleverly crafted using the forms of 2 swans. The symbol would go on to seal many of the label's releases. Swan Song was officially launched in May 1974 with 2 luxurious parties, one at the Four Seasons in New York City on May 7th and the other at the Hotel Bel Air in Los Angeles on May 10th. While the Zeppelin bosses partied in the States, 2 Swan Song artists attended the Summer of '74 festival held on May 18th at the Valley Stadium, home of the Charlton Athletic Football Club. It was a sold-out event with a massive crowd that enjoyed the music of Bad Company, Maggie Bell, Dave Mason, English folk band Lindisfarne, Post Frampton, Humble Pie with Clem Clemson on guitar, a last-minute edition Montrose with Sammy Hagar, and headliner The Who. Bad Company went on early, and while the audience mostly praised Paul's vocals, they could see the spirit of Free reborn through this new name and spirit. Maggie Bell faced the tough job of going right before The Who, with rude fans throwing cans and trash at her. They call her UK's Janis Joplin, but gear problems cut her set short after just 20 minutes. The crew tried to fix it, and you wish Peter Grant was there. Audience reports had Maggie say, "It had to happen to me, right?" The trauma of Les Harvey's death was still fresh. And so, just 6 days after their Summer of '74 concert, Bad Company's debut, Badco, was released in the UK via Island Records on May 24th. Like the Swan Song logo, Hypnosis was also commissioned for the artwork here. A minimalist design slowly built shockwaves and a word-of-mouth buzz. Not Burrell, but buzz. Publicity. The UK version had a black gatefold with a diamond-shaped collage of the band's live performances. These shots were most likely taken on the band's first UK tour by Jill Furmanovsky, responsible for Wishbone Ash's Live Dates 1973 gatefold work. Out of the 8 songs on Badco, Paul Rodgers was credited for all instruments on the closing number Seagull. Also, there was saxophone duties performed by Boz Burrell's former King Crimson mate Mel Collins. Much like ELP's debut, Bad Company was deemed a supergroup from the start, with previous Free, Mott the Hoople, and King Crimson stints referenced in British media. A May 25th Sounds article talked about their Summer of '74 performance, with Mick Ralphs deemed a great guitarist, yet a bit shy, while Paul Rodgers was praised for his pipes and confidence. Traces of Free were inescapable, with Simon Kirke's drumming pointed as the backbone, with Boz Burrell his rhythm ally. Maggie Bell was back on the road, this time for a second US tour, 12 dates throughout June as supporting act for bands like ZZ Top and Blue Oyster Cult, plus a career highlight opening for The Who at Madison Square Garden on the 13th. Also on the 13th, there was a special photo shoot and interview session with Paul Rodgers conducted by the Japanese magazine Music Life. In several shots taken at their London home, we can see Paul's wife, Machiko Shimizu, along their 2-year-old son, Steve. In one of the photos, Steve is holding a June 1974 issue featuring Led Zeppelin on the cover. The cover shot itself was taken at the Continental Hyatt in Los Angeles in July 1973. Steve Rodgers would later grow up to become a musician just like his father.
Use my American Express card to buy a long dress for my wife on Madison Avenue.
And everywhere.
Call 800-AE8-5000 to apply for an American Express card.
Swan Song had already planned a much-anticipated North American tour for Bad Company that Led Zeppelin 1969 could only dream of. Big venues, big names, big opportunities. Yes, we can say it helped Bad Company was on Swan Song Records, but they really worked hard for the riches, and their live material was just what 1974 audiences wanted. The band played a warm-up gig in Germany on June 8th, the same month their first single was released, Can't Get Enough, with B-side Little Misfortune. It peaked at number 15th in the UK, and Peter Grant could only wait for what would happen in America. Meanwhile, ABC's In Concert aired Season 2, Episode 23 on July 19th, 1974, featuring Rod Stewart and the Faces, Electric Light Orchestra, and Peter Grant's protege, Maggie Bell. Bad Company kicked off their first North American tour at Miami's High Life Fronton on July 23rd. Yes, the same venue where ELP began their brain salad surgery tour back in November. You can check my retrospective on this tour here on the channel. Swan Song's logistics for Bad Company's first US run were smart. Deep Purple, the Rolling Stones, and Pink Floyd were all off the road. Elton John wouldn't begin his tour until late September, and Yes had already completed a spring concert series not scheduled to return to America until November. Still, the summer landscape was crowded. From July through August, Bad Company faced real competition. David Bowie's theatrical Diamond Dogs tour was in full swing, Santana remained a top draw, and Kiss was rapidly building momentum. The Grateful Dead were as active as ever. Emerson, Lake and Palmer had returned to the US following their historic California Jam performance, and Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young were generating massive attention with their heavily publicized reunion tour. And just 4 days later, while touring between Louisville and Chicago, Bad Company was officially released in the United States and Canada on July 27, 1974. The same John Denver's Annie song hit #1 on Billboard. The US version of Batco featured a slightly different gatefold, with a colored portrait showcasing Boz Burrell, Paul Rodgers, Mick Ralphs, and Simon Kirke to North American audiences. But perhaps most important of all, for the first time, record buyers would see the Swan Song Angel, subconsciously building a powerful connection to the brand that would follow Zeppelin and its roster for years to come. Outside of Freddie and B.B. King covers, Palace of the King, and Rock Me Baby, the average setlist for the tour included 6 songs from their Batco debut, plus B-side Little Misfortune, 2 songs Rodgers and Kirke used to do with Free, Easy on My Soul, and The Stealer, and a special treat for fans, 2 tracks that would appear on their next studio album, Deal with a Preacher and Shooting Star. By the time Bad Company reached Cleveland on July 29th, there were news reports praising the band's chemistry, and soon the venues got bigger. August 1st, supporting Steel Eyes Band, August 2nd with Santana, Just a Single Can't Get Enough was about to peak at #5 in the United States, August 15th at the legendary Inglewood Forum with the Edgar Winter Group, followed by the San Diego Sports Arena on the 16th, plus Oakland's Coliseum on the 17th. Talk about making it big. Led Zeppelin didn't play Oakland Coliseum until 1977. Bad Company could already put that on their checklist. Their momentum kept going with a September 1st show at the Texas-sized Romping Stomping Festival featuring Santana, Joe Cocker, and Swan Song's proteges, Bad Company. It was a massive venue that packed, according to many sources, up to 70,000 fans. Bad Company got a surprise visit that day from the Swan Song office. Peter Grant had been on tour with them since mid-August, occasionally helping roadies load in gear, speaking to other managers to extend Bad Company's set time, or urging journalists to write something favorable about his proteges. Looking after their investment, none other than Jimmy Page showed up. The guitar magician was in town, and he looked happy. This was a goldmine start for Swan Song. Bad Company played a 12-song setlist and was joined by Page for an encore. B.B. King's Rock Me Baby, and to say the crowd lost their minds is an understatement. Too much star power in one place, and Led Zeppelin never got a chance to play this venue. To have Jimmy Page on stage was a blessing for the 1974 stars Rodgers, Burrell, Ralphs, and Kirke. This scene would repeat itself at the Schaefer Music Festival with yet another Jimmy Page guest spot. Playing this show was special for him as Led Zeppelin had played the festival back in July 1969. A September 7th Musical Express article by Led Zeppelin friend Lisa Robinson shared Bad Company's impressions of America. They were definitely struck by success. The interview took place at the famous Continental Hyatt Hotel on August 13th. Mick Ralphs had been at this hotel with Mata Hoople, and he was now returning with Bad Company to make some serious money. Also at the hotel, Robert Plant, another Swan Song boss, wanted to be near Bad Company's action firsthand. So Lisa Robinson said no rooms were trashed. The Bad Company guys were, quote, neat and relaxed. Mick Ralphs was quoted saying, "What gets me is the bigness of it all. The wealth here, you know, especially coming from England because it's such a poor country now. For the first time in my life, I'm in a position where I can buy a house, and it's sort of incredible to me because by the British standard, this is the sort of thing you go for, the goal. When you're young, you have your ambitions, and this is always one of them, to own your own house. I sort of forgot about that while I was with Mott and everything. It was a struggle just to keep our heads above water, let alone think about things like that." Paul Rodgers added, "I'm having a great time because it wasn't really happening for any of us with our bands before, and this tour has been a joy to do. I really see it as a band, and I'm the singer, but it's a band and I'm a part of it, and we all do our little movements and things, but we do it together."
You say yeah! 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 And this is the last big on the tour, and we really enjoyed it. Really. What more can I say? Thank you.
It was during this tour that Bad Company was captured on video for Don Kirshner's rock concert. Bootleg copies have circulated over the years, dating this show October 12th, 1974, but that date doesn't hold up. Bad Company's US tour ended on September 10th in Boston, so why would they fly back from England with full gear and crew just for a one-off TV taping? It makes no logistical sense. Another frequently cited date for this is September 12th at Long Beach Auditorium, a venue that doesn't appear anywhere in their official touring records. But here's why I believe that's wrong too. According to Don Kirshner's own syndication records, the episode featuring Bad Company, Rare Earth, and Renaissance aired on August 26, 1974, and when we study Rare Earth's footage, it's clear it was filmed at the same venue, which only deepens the mystery around when the taping actually took place. I reviewed both bands' tour stats carefully, and there's no evidence they ever shared a stage during this period. So how did they all end up in the same episode? The answer lies in how Don Kirshner's rock concert operated. The show was pre-recorded, often weeks in advance. That means the taping must have taken place well before the August 26th air date. Now, looking at Bad Company's information, there is a narrow window in late July or early August 1974 when this could have happened. Rare Earth had a touring gap. Bad Company was in Southern California. My best guess, the taping occurred either just days before their US tour officially began, or more likely on August 3rd, their one day off between Santa Barbara and Fresno. Bad Company's Badco debut peaked at number 1 on Billboard by the end of the month, ultimately becoming the 4th best-selling album of 1974, behind Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young and both Santana's Greatest Hits and Elton John's Greatest Hits. Rock-wise, Badco was the greatest hit of 1974. Now, in a 2024 interview, Swan Song's Danny Goldberg stated that the label earned 18 to 20% of the retail price, while Bad Company received a 10 to 12% royalty rate. Estimated US sales by the end of 1974, 1 million copies. Still about 1.5 million less than Houses of the Holy, but you do the math. Led Zeppelin could afford the luxury of staying off the road for now. That 52 UK corporate tax percentage was now manageable through their own label, or should I say, good company. On the next episode of the making of Swan Song Records, the honeymoon phase is over and the pressure is on as Bad Company rushes to follow up their explosive debut. The pretty things make a hopeful toast inside the Halloween caves. Led Zeppelin prepares for America 1975 and Maggie Bell commits career suicide. Kinda. If you enjoy the episodes, I invite you to please support the research process over at Patreon. You can join us and keep the studio going. This is what funds the operation, and I really want to thank my patrons once again for making it possible for everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.